Thanks once again for dropping by the channel. If you like the content, if you're new to the channel, please hit subscribe, share the video if you enjoyed it, if you felt it was useful. Now let's get into this. Actually, before I actually get into what I'm going to talk about, the setup I have here, you know, the armchair, because remember we used to have the couch was where I used to do the videos. So we're doing them on the armchair now, which I quite like. I think is a little bit just better. I am thinking of changing it up again, but I haven't decided what exactly I'm going to do, because I'm thinking of doing these videos in the kitchen now, because I got that G-Man plaque that I have now, as well as the laptop out there, and I think it looks a bit more, I don't know, it looks a bit more professional. The only thing is I need to get a new stand, because this stand isn't big enough to kind of give me the right kind of height. So don't know, watch the space. I like doing them here, but I'm just thinking if I want to make this channel kind of look a bit better. So I don't know, maybe that's just that's an interesting thought. Let me know what you think about this setup, because I much prefer it here than I did over there. Especially, and over there it was too far from the camera, and you were like in a box, whereas this is a lot more easier. It's like Chael Sonnen, you know, from UFC. It's kind of the way he does it. Anyway, enough about that. That's irrelevant. Let's get into this. Let's get into boxing. So Eddie Hearn has been discussing some of his upcoming fights, and a fight that I'm curious about, I think most people are curious about. I think a fight that if it had happened in May, most people would have had a vested interest in it. It is obviously Oleksandr Usyk versus Dereck Chisora. Now, he's provisionally named the date of, I think, October 31st, I think Halloween. If it's on a Sunday, or it's on a Saturday anyway. I think that's the day he's given, provisionally. I think he said it in the O2. Now, all this really does hinge on whether fans are allowed back in or not. And that's really what this fight hinges on. Because Dillian Whyte versus Povetkin, or even, although AJ probably doesn't want to do it, but well, maybe he wouldn't actually get away with it, but definitely with Dillian Whyte Povetkin, you could get away with doing that fight behind closed doors in fight camp. You know, you could. Povetkin is known for, you know, several things, but obviously people in the UK would know him as a guy who gave AJ some problems early on in their fight. Of course, Dillian Whyte, he's featured on several pay-per-views, he's headlined several, he's fought on AJ's undercards. The British fight fans know Dillian Whyte, he's a known quantity. So putting that fight on pay-per-view, even if it's behind closed doors, it wasn't actually a bad card, you know, I mean, it wasn't. Obviously, I think we would have liked to have seen Bakoli versus Kuzman, I know I would have. But in terms of what we got, you would have just chucked Zach Chelli versus Jack Cullen out for that fight. But in terms of what we got, it wasn't bad. You know, it wasn't. So you could do a fight like that on pay-per-view. Now, Usyk versus Chisora, right? You cannot do that on pay-per-view without fans. You can't. Both boxers, I don't know how much money they're going to be looking for, but you can't do that on pay-per-view without fans. You need a gate for that fight. And Eddie Hearn is talking provisionally the end of October. Even if like minor groups of fans were allowed in, like for argument's sake, we'll say a couple of thousand or something like that. I don't know exactly what the full capacity of the O2 is, but I think it's something like 15,000-20,000. Could be wrong, it could be a bit more. It's probably not going to be anything like that. You know, you're probably talking December, January before we'll see numbers like that being chucked around. So if you're talking a couple of thousand, we'll just chuck a number, we'll say 3,000 in by then, you would either have to do one of two things. You know, you'd either have to bin that fight altogether, reschedule it to next year, and give both guys interim fights, which I don't rule out both guys having interim fights, because by the time October comes around, both guys will have been inactive for a year. You know, the last time Chisora fought was when he beat David Price. That was on the Prograis Taylor undercard. And obviously Usyk fought Shez Witherspoon. And Usyk, more so than Chisora, he's been very inactive over the last 2 years pretty much. Because one thing about Usyk picked up his world title very quickly. I think it was only his 10th fight when he beat Glowacki. Within 2 months of winning that WBO title, he was fighting Machunu. With a few months later, he was fighting Michael Hunter. You know, and looking back, you know, Michael Hunter, you know, a very, very good fighter, gave Usyk some problems. Usyk went into the World Boxing Super Series, and obviously he won that. But Usyk has been active. He's been kept busy. He's been staying active. That all pretty much went to bed after he beat Tony Bellew. Obviously, he said the next thing you do will be move the heavyweight. We've heard, we heard names, we heard Tyrone Spying, we heard Carlos Takam. These fights were actually apparently signed, sealed. And obviously, Usyk had injuries, he had to pull out, he had to reschedule, etc., etc. We ended up with Chez Witherspoon in October. And I think that was one of the reasons why Usyk didn't look great in that fight. I didn't think he looked terrible, but he didn't look as sharp as we've seen him. I think the inactivity didn't help him. And I think that it's not going to help him now. If he goes straight in and fights Chisora, I don't think we're getting this fight this year, people. I don't think you could put this fight on with a limited number of fans. I think for this fight to make any kind of money for Eddie Hearn, so he doesn't completely, have a bad loss in terms of money received, you're going to need a full crowd. Like, this fight would have to happen in London, because Chisora is, he's liked, he's well known in London. The London fans come in, they sing in the O2, they cheer his name. Usyk's not really, he's known for beating Tony Bellew in the UK, but he's not a massive name, nor is Chisora, but he is more established to the British fans than Oleksandr Usyk. Maybe I'm selling Chisora, maybe he's a bigger name than people give him credit for, but certainly now it's like, maybe if it's not in London, is it really, does anyone really, care if it's not in London? I don't know. But for me, that fight is probably going to get put in the back burner. So the date Eddie Hearn is saying the end of October, I'm seriously hesitant about making plans to watch that fight at the end of October. Seriously. I think they need a full gate. Alright? Or, if they aren't going to get a full gate, they're going to have an absolutely, probably horrific undercard. But they're going to want cheap fights. They're not going to want to be putting on, fights where, okay, we're paying our top guys this amount of money. Now we have to have, like, this guy on who's asking for X amount. They're going to try and cut their losses. So they're probably going to keep that card cheap. I assume, anyway. I definitely think we'll probably see Usyk Chisora fight this year, but not each other. I think Eddie Hearn will give them both stay busy fights. That's what I'm thinking. And obviously with stay busy fights, you do run the risk of one guy losing, one guy picking up an injury. We know Usyk has been injury prone, the last 2 years, so there's always a risk there. But in terms of this fight actually happening this year, I mean, I want to be optimistic and say, yeah, and I'd love to see this fight, but I'm not holding my breath that we'll see this fight this year. They could bin this fight altogether and just let Usyk go, maybe fight a tall heavyweight, just in preparation for AJ, and maybe go in then and, potentially fight AJ next year. Or we're hearing Eddie Hearn say AJ could vacate, I mean, God only knows. I think Parker is next in line for, I think it's Usyk and Parker in the WBO 1 and 2. I mean, that's a good fight. I wouldn't mind seeing that. What do I think? Chisora might be a trickier. He might be, that. Just from a style point of view, I think Chisora might be a bit trickier. I don't know. Could be wrong about that, but yeah, this is just a quick 2 cents on this video or on this subject. Let me know your thoughts down below. What do you think about this fight? Do you think we're going to see it this year? You think we'll see Usyk Chisora this year? Think we'll see either of them at all this year? If it's not with each other, do you think they'll be in stay busy fights? Leave it all down below. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like, subscribe. Of course, if you are new to the channel, as always. Hope you enjoyed this video. I'll talk to you people.